Hello everyone, I am the third reporter, Jemarie Enriquez, and my topic would be negotiating labor agreements. After appropriate preparations by both parties, the negotiation process itself begins. The negotiation process involves representatives from management and the labor union meeting at agreed on time and at agreed on location and working together to reach a mutually acceptable labor management. This may be either brief or lengthy. In simple terms, the negotiation process refers to the systematic arrangement of things that are needed to be considered by both parties or the management and the labor union to come up with an acceptable agreement for both parties. To further understand the negotiation process, there is a framework used, and this is called the bargaining zone. During preparations for negotiation, both sides are likely to attempt to define three critical points. For the organization, the bargaining zone and its three intermediate points include the employer's maximum limit, second would be the employer's expectation, and last would be the employer's desired result on items being negotiated. An example in the book is that the organization might have a zero increase in wages and benefits as a desired result. It is a desired result on the part of the organization since it would cut off more expenses that will be provided by the organization. Or this is also known in the bargaining zone as the management's target point. But it also recognizes that this desired result is unlikely and that it expects to have to provide a modest increase in wages and benefits totaling perhaps 4 to 5%. If preparations are done thoroughly, however, managers also know the maximum amount they are willing to pay, which might be as high as 7 or 8%, which this is also known as the management's resistance point, because paying more than or increasing the wages in total of 7 or 8%, it would damage the company since it would take more expenses than the modest increase of 4 to 5%. This is a forecast if the limit or the predicted heavy bargain of the labor union. It clearly showed the three critical points in the part of the organization. The management may take into account the union's demand, but it also showed where the management would likely rather suffer through a strike than pay more than the employer's desired result. On the other side of the table, or the bargaining zone, the labor union also defines a bargaining zone for itself that includes 3 points. First is the union's minimum acceptable limit on what it will take from the management. The union resistance point may be the settlement level below which the union will strike. Second is its own expectations about what management is likely to agree to, and the third would be the most it can reasonably expect to get from management, or the union target point. It is like the reverse or the counterpart of the management's from the management's point. For instance, the labor union might feel that it has to provide a minimum increase of 2 to 3% in wages and benefits to its members. It expects a settlement of around 5% but would like to get 9 or 10%. In the spirit of bargaining, it may make an opening demand to management of as high as 12%. Of course, this is the maximum limit of the union's demand, and this is the not the employee's desired result and exceeds the employer's maximum limit, and they know that it will not be approved by the management for it has exceeded the limit. Hence, during the opening negotiating session, labor might inform management that it demands a 12% wage and benefit increase, and the employer might begin by stating emphatically that no increases should be expected, for 12% increase in wage will be so high the organization will suffer. Assuming, however, that some overlap exists between the organizations and the union's demands and expectations in the bargaining zone, or this is also called a positive settlement zone, and also assuming that both sides are willing to compromise and work hard at reaching an agreement, then an agreement probably will be attained. Though this is the case of a positive settlement, but there are also barriers to effective negotiation. In the positive settlement, both sides are willing to compromise and work hard at reaching an agreement. But in the barriers, there are some cases or things that hinders the labor agreements. First, the foremost barrier to effective negotiation between management and labor is the lack of an overlap for the bargaining zones of the respective sides, down with their maximum desired limit. And some negotiations can also be complicated by inept negotiators and poor communication between negotiators. Effective negotiation is a critical skill that not everyone possesses, and we all knew that. There are some people meant to be negotiators, and not everyone can manage that. Thus, if managers select a representative, someone who does not understand the negotiation process, then difficulties are likely to arise. Though, if the management picks a negotiator that is knowledgeable about the agreement or the labor agreement, as a result of their diligent negotiation, the management and labor should be able to agree on a mutually acceptable labor contract. If, however, management and labor cannot agree on a new contract or want to replace an existing contract after a series of bargaining sessions, then either sides or both sides might declare that they have reached an impasse. An impasse is simply a situation which at least one party believes that reaching an agreement is not imminent. Or this is a situation in which no progress seems possible, especially with the labor agreements. If an impasse occurs, there are several actions that can be taken by either side or both sides in an attempt to break the impasse. So, we will now discuss the resolving impasses. The basic objective of most of these tactics is to force the other side to alter or redefine its bargaining zone so that an accord can be reached. The most potent weapon that the union holds is the potential for a strike. A strike occurs when employees walk off their jobs and refuse to work. An example of this would be like in the Cadenang Ginto, wherein the employees march in front of the Camillas or the company for the unpaid overtime that they rendered, and this is where the strike starts. They refuse to work more because they are undercompensated. During a strike, workers represented by the union frequently march at the entrance to the employer's facility with signs explaining their reasons for striking. This action is called picketing and is intended to elicit sympathy for the union and intimidate management. Strikes are costly to both parties because the union will likely suffer expenses just by marching in front of the company, by making the signs and everything, and it is of course costly to the organization because clients and customers then have to look elsewhere for goods and services, and there is no guarantee that they will return after the strike is settled. Strike costs are important for the process that one of the tactics involved in labor negotiations is directly tied to strike cost. Both parties recognize that each side will suffer cost if there is a strike, because if there are strikes, the organization or the management will most likely hire strike breakers. In the vast majority of cases, however, neither party wants a strike. But there are also two less extreme tactics that unions sometimes use. These are boycotts and slowdown. A boycott occurs when union members agree not to buy the products of a targeted employer. A boycott is simply when union members do not buy the product or have spread to their co-unions not to buy the product or patronize the product or service of their certain employer. Second would be the slowdown. A slowdown occurs when workers perform their jobs but at a much slower pace than normal. This is like when an employee would go to work, or the union might agree to go to work, but they are doing their job slowly. Instead of finishing it in an hour, they will finish it in a day. A certain tasks or certain activities, they will do it in a much slower pace. And there is also a variation on the slowdown, and this occurs when union members agree, sometimes informally, to call in sick in large numbers on certain days. This is an action that is called sick out. This is where union members agree to not to go to work and pretend that they are sick, so that the management will search for them or will lead them. Some kinds of strikes and labor actions are illegal. Foremost among these illegal actions is the wildcat strike. This occurs when workers suddenly go on strike without the authorization, presumably, of the strikers' union, and while a binding labor agreement is still in effect, which is what makes it illegal. Management also has certain tactics that it may employ in its efforts to break an impasse. One possibility is called a lockout, and it occurs when the employer denies employees access to the workplace. This is simply where, if the union has the sick out, there is also the lockout tactic of the organization, wherein they would deny access of the workplace for the employees to work, so that they cannot earn wages or salaries that are meant for them to to receive if they did go to work that day. Though in many situations, other alternatives for resolving an impasse are also available. Common alternatives include the use of mediation and arbitration. First, the mediation. In mediation, a neutral third party, called the mediator, listens to and reviews the information presented by both sides. The mediator then makes an informed recommendation and provides advice to both parties about what she or he believes should be done. A mediator would listen to both sides as they defended their positions, and would then review evidence about other settlements in the industry and the financial health of the mine. The second, or another alternative to resolving impasse, is arbitration, or the process in which both sides agree in advance that they will accept the recommendations made by an independent third-party arbitrator. Like a mediator, the arbitrator listens to both sides of the dispute and presents and reviews all the evidence. In arbitration, however, the information that results is placed in the form of a proposed settlement agreement that the parties have agreed in advance to accept. Thus, a settlement is imposed on the parties, and the impasse is ended. The major difference about the mediator and the arbitrator is that the mediator would just give advice and recommendations to both parties without having a guarantee that they will accept these recommendations, while the arbitrator first they have already agreed on whatever the arbitrator will decide. An alternative form of arbitration has therefore been proposed that should induce the parties. It has agreed to negotiate a settlement by potentially imposing strike-like costs on both parties. Under final offer arbitration, the parties bargain until impasse. At that point, the two parties' final offers are submitted to the arbitrator. Under traditional arbitration, the arbitrator is then free to impose a settlement at any point he or she wishes. But under final offer arbitration, the arbitrator has only two choices for the imposed settlement: the two parties' final offer, and the arbitrator must select either one as the imposed settlement. That's all, and thank you for listening.